There we go. Once again, all of my audio sources have completely defaulted out. It must be some glitch involving probably a driver update or something. What is up, everybody? This is Jay, aka MultimediaJay. It looks like my audio sources are still correct, but that's just something you gotta watch for in OBS. Yeah, you gotta watch for it in OBS, where you basically have a situation where something hardware-wise changes. Oh, you know what it is? It's probably because I enabled TPM on my system. That thing that Microsoft says that I need to have in order to run Windows 10. Yeah, Windows 11. Yeah, mixing up Windows 10 and Windows 11. How many more times am I going to do that before Windows 11 launches? Whatever. Anyways, so I suppose I should check these other... Let's see. Well, so the stuff we're using right now through the Yeti Nano is correct. I just got to add something for the sound system on the Play Some Stuff thing and things along those lines. What is up? We are here tonight to talk about computer stuff in Windows 11 yet again. And there is some stuff that's going on over on Twitch that I noted over on Twitter. The UI has been updated, which is going to the UI on Twitch has changed. Down in the lower left corner, there's like, if you have a shared audience with another streamer, or if a streamer has a shared audience with another streamer, the streamers that they share audiences with show up in the lower left-hand corner. That has huge ramifications for Twitch, because one of my most recent criticisms of Twitch is their UI design. Twitch, basically, it's left versus right. The left panel, well, I should probably reverse this because, you know, we've got a camera and everything like that. So, anyways, the left side of the screen on Twitch, the left side of the screen on Twitch the left menu is very robust compared to its YouTube counterpart. There are a lot more features there, and as a result, it is way easier to find someone to watch in that left screen versus clicking through literally anything over on the right. Trying to do this in front of a camera is so stupid, man. So I saw Twitch trying to improve things on the right side of everything, but I was like, that doesn't matter because everything takes more clicks than it does on the left side of everything. It's weird having the hands reversed. Yeah, so with this change, it's probably one of the biggest changes for discoverability and how Twitch works in a very long time. But I'm not going to talk about that tonight. I'm not going to be talking about any of that kind of stuff, because I'm going to basically be talking about the computer stuff for now. We'll save the discussion for Twitch for maybe the weekend or something, in case we get clobbered again this week. I have a video to edit if we have overtime for the rest of the week. We didn't have it tonight, but we have a heat wave and overtime. That is not a recipe for wanting to do a lot of live streaming. Probably come home, plop down, ESO, maybe watch some streamers, a mix of both, zonk out in front of the TV, I don't know, but we'll say what we need to say about the rest of this Windows 11 stuff tonight, and then we'll save the Twitch thing for the next time. We'll save the Twitch thing for a little later on. Maybe next time I feel like I have some more energy or something along those lines, and I can actually do this UI update discussion justice. What the heck is that? That's the hand sanitizer. That's why. Some things get moved around from time to time on this desk, and some of it's in the shot, some of it is. I'm almost out of the Suave stuff. This greasy as all heck. Way too many inactive ingredients in that hand sanitizer. But it'd be good to use up the rest of this hand sanitizer from last year when it was pretty much all over the place and stuff along those lines. So let's bust this out and all this other fun stuff. You know what's interesting about this whole thing? Well, actually, let me clear up before we crank up the music and fire up Excel tonight, because the big thing I want to illustrate is the longevity of my gaming PCs and why this Windows 11 artificial obsolescence thing matters so much. But before we get into that, I want to say something incredibly important about people who could criticize me as some kind of hypocrite for this whole thing with Windows 11, especially the TPM requirement. It's kind of ironic that I'm very pro COVID vaccine as a form of technology when it comes to dealing with the pandemic, because it is a form of technology, and mRNA in particular is a technological marvel that it became viable right in time for this pandemic. but yet I'm kicking against the bricks on Windows 11. So here's the thing. In both cases, you have someone's choices having consequences. So, but at the same time, I do not oppose TPM. I do not oppose a security device to protect your credentials and stuff through hardware. I may be a multimedia guy, but I follow a little bit of IT security as well. I know about some of the screwball ways in which people are trying to execute malware nowadays, especially as the Internet of Things and other internet computer-like devices have spread throughout the tech world. Smart devices, smart speakers, hackable houses. There's even a problem right now in Texas with the whole ERCOT thing. And, you know, the grid in Texas, by design, is a little more isolated than the entire rest of the country. And so there's problems where they're wondering, you know, how can they handle the load from a heat wave in Texas with a lot of people slamming the heck out of the electrical grid? One of the issues that's come up is smart thermostats being remoted into and the AC being turned down, so to speak. So people are coming home, their house is set to 80 degrees in the middle of a heat wave. So the AC doesn't get to feel like AC because the power company, through a third party, of course, but still kind of sort of, can remote in and turn the thermostat up in your house to turn down your air conditioning remotely. So the idea of a hackable house is not something I like. So I am limited in how I've used smart technology. I don't want someone to drive up to my house. Well, I have the voice discrimination thing set up on the speakers anyways, but I don't want people to shout like trigger words from my smart speakers and mess with my house just by standing outside the house and shouting through the walls, you know? So I have very limited stuff. Lighting. When I bought that air conditioner that's in the back and, you know, cooling the house down in the middle of this heat wave, that air conditioner was the dumb air conditioner. There were actually smart air conditioners on sale that I could set up on my network and voice control, and I decided no, I didn't want an air conditioner that someone could mess with a voice command. You know, I want a dumb air conditioner that I have to physically walk over to and adjust, like in the olden days. Smart technology doesn't have to cover everything. I also still have dumb lights in the house. If someone makes all my smart lights go haywire, then I'll just turn on the regular lights. The regular light switches still go to regular lights. Imagine that. They also, in the Geek House light mode, is largely powered by dumb bulbs because I'll just I can shut the lights off and do daylight mode for the old way in which I recorded YouTube videos. So bottom line is, if somebody were to mess with my smart lights through some kind of attack or something like that, they would have limited results, and those limited results would be nothing too wild. It would just ruin the mood of this kind of techie looking blue and purple type thing that I do when I stream, when I do videos nowadays. So that would be the only effect of it, so to speak. So a nice to have wouldn't be around anymore, but it wouldn't affect anything critical. So the thing is, I support TPMs. And I support some kind of hardware security key being involved with computers. And I supported this idea many years ago when Steam really started to take off in terms of Skyrim came out and you needed Steam to play Skyrim. So in my case, I was one of the many people introduced to Steam through Skyrim. So when I was introduced to Steam and I was introduced to how the accounts work and offline mode and things along those lines, I was introduced to the possibility that an extended internet outage could lock me out of my single-player games because of Steam DRM or something like that. And that's when I tossed around the idea for a hardware authentication dongle that you plugged into a USB port. Maybe set it up to where you could flash your credentials onto it and then flip a switch to lock it so nothing could write to it. Physically could, kind of like read-only mode on an SD card. So you set that up, and now you have something physical that if it's plugged into the computer, you don't have to worry about signing into your Steam account. You'll always be able to sign into it. There is no offline mode that expires or anything of that sort. So hardware authentication keys, if you can control them outside of the computer world, so as in physical device with switches, hardware authentication devices is something I don't have a problem with. Windows 11 requiring TPM is not what I have a problem with here. What I have a problem with is Microsoft nannying people and basically being the nanny for PC gamers who may want to experiment with an older system, or they have a system that might have some power still left in it in terms of mathematical capability in the CPU, but the CPU isn't on the officially supported list for Windows 11. And so now they artificially are being rendered obsolete by something that Microsoft has decided. Not the passage of time, not a situation where maybe it doesn't work very well because of something that happens, not any of this other stuff. But this is just arbitrary, just like the product life cycles. And I still think Microsoft is going to run into a situation where they have no idea just how PC gamers are trying to get their systems to last for a very long time. I can tell you that longevity was one of my goals with Monolith. That's one of the reasons why I haven't bothered with overclocking, because overclocking was part of what took down Tuxedo. So it's got a new motherboard now, but the original motherboard for Tuxedo, my old Phenom 2 1090T system from 2010, Tuxedo was my longest lasting system ever. 6 years roughly. About 6 years roughly until I had to replace it because the hardware was flaking out. And it was not very power efficient anyways. It was like a diesel truck of a computer. The Intel Sandy Bridge would have been much better than the Phenom 2, but I was an AMD fan at the time and stuff like that. Ryzen's pretty decent, but now Intel's trying to play ball again, so thank you, AMD, for making Intel not so expensive right in time for me to consider building a new system. Just like what happened last time with the threat of Ryzen. Some people laughed at me for getting a Skylake i7. They also laughed at me for getting a Skylake i7 and putting it on a non-overclocking motherboard. The detail that they don't know about, or maybe they forgot, or maybe they never knew, is that Skylake 6700s were $300 back then. 6700Ks were $320. For $20, you had a notably higher base clock and notably higher boost clock than the base 6700. So I basically paid $20 for Intel to factory overclock my processor, essentially. Never bothered with overclocking it or trying to push more out of it, because I prefer to err on the side of stuff being stable and lasting years and years and years. Computers are not so ridiculously expensive anymore, especially processors, and especially if AMD is the tail that wags the dog with their sockets and forces Intel to make sockets last longer. So we live in a world nowadays where your computers are, you can upgrade them for longer than before. So things won't get too expensive anytime soon. So why, unless you have a really awesome cooling system, which if you can cool something or you can make something more power efficient, why not go that route instead? Try and close the efficiency gap between PCs and mobile devices, which can be used as computers nowadays, by the way. But overclocking the heck out of your processor is not the only option anymore, and it's not a problem even money-wise if you choose to go that route. So that's what I did with Monolith. 6700K in a B motherboard doesn't support overclocking, but you know what? It was a $20 difference for a higher base clock and a higher boost clock back then. And that is the sort of thing that a lot of the people that heckled me about it, mostly back in the day, just like they heckled me about not getting a Core i5 when you didn't need more than four cores for gaming. Yeah, I saw Ryzen coming and wasn't buying into that nonsense. But that's the missing detail that the naysayers of years gone by had back in those days. But the longevity of gaming PCs is really something to behold. And I want to open up Excel tonight and actually make a list of all of my main systems and their time in the spotlight. And also we can prognosticate actually as to how long we want to keep Monolith going when we know that Windows 10 is going end of life in 2025. So we can actually do some what ifs and have some fun with that. And because it's going to be a rather chill discussion as we fiddle around in Excel, I've actually swapped out the synthwave music from the Winamp for Streambeats Ambient, just came out. So should be more relaxed, more chill streamy type stuff. Kind of like when people do like Animal Crossing streams and things along those lines, except I'm being a nerd as usual. With the drinks as usual, it's the middle of a heat wave and I've been doing some running around. I need to stay hydrated. Not alcoholic either. That wouldn't be good for my blood pressure in my old age. Right. Let's see here. What happened? Did the connection just drop out? Check that preview window. No. Let's go. Morning Dew. How loud is this? Is it playing? Oh, it sounds like Mr. Rogers. Hey, neighbor. Today we're going to look at computer stuff. All right. What? Let's see. Back out, discard. It is still working, right? Yeah, everything's going through the Yeti Nano like it's supposed to. Okay, let's fire up Excel. We're going to make a spreadsheet, and we're going to soup it up. I thought about doing this in PowerPoint, but whoa. Sticky mouse button. What the heck's going on here? Put the ribbon on screen. Jay Silverton is logged in. All right. Excel needs a... Okay, you know what? Well, can I do dark mode? Hold on, before I put that on the screen. Dark mode. Date and time. Turn on dark mode for apps. Can I do Excel in dark mode? Wow, looks like an Xbox now. Can I stream? If I set that to dark mode, which I just did, and I close and reopen Excel, will Excel be in dark mode? Whoops, that's Audacity. Wow, I'm screwing everything up today. Nope, Excel is Excel is Excel. It's gonna look like Excel. Change that setting back. It looks cool though, although it does kind of look like an Xbox. Dark mode. Let's see, defaults. Choose your color, custom. So Windows. No, not light mode for Windows. Apps are in light mode. Windows is in dark mode. All right. Put my accent color on everything so everything's nice and blue. Okay, let's do this. OBS off to screen number 2. Thank you very much. Let's get some Excel on the screen here. Let's get nicely lit up by it. Start with a blank workbook. Oh, look, the traditional book 1. Isn't that nice? Link. It linked. And all the audio is still going out properly. All right. Actually, before we do that, let's do a file save as, and let's save it as something. There we go. No, please do not save it on the internet. I have storage space on this computer. See that? It was trying to save on Microsoft OneDrive. Way too much cloud crap. I have a MultimediaJay spreadsheet folder on one of my data drives. That's fine enough. So, Windows 11 versus my computer's longevity. That's a nice name for it. Back to Excel. Okay. Let's see, now how can we make this... We are in Excel. Woohoo! Playing with Excel at 3:30 in the morning. What kind of life have I lived? Better knock back some more of that stuff. Alright, let's see. So first off, to get rid of the grid lines so it doesn't look as much like a spreadsheet. I could dark mode this by changing the color of everything. Alright, let's turn down some of the music in the headset here and let's concentrate. Alright. Computer. From. To. Actually, no. Let's do, let's have some fun with this. And let's put the processor in there, too. Processor. From. To. And let's make this, let's give this, a Power Query type format here. So, data from table and range. Yeah, let's do that. Let's actually make a bogus Power Query thing. We're not going to do anything with the query just yet. We're just going to actually save it as table 1. So you can't see Power Query because of the way things work here, but it does automatically save changes. Now it's trying to output it somewhere, which I don't want. Goodbye. Get rid of that. But see, now it's got a nice little format on it. We can change it with the table design. So why don't we just do... Yeah, let's do the alternating things for that kind of stuff. And let's center everything and make everything nice and big. Matter of fact, make it nice and big vertically as well. We don't need the query or connections. We're not going to use Power Query for this just yet. And this top layer right here, can we put a... Oh, we can't put a shadow on it. Okay, well, close enough. All right, let's rattle them off then. HP Pavilion. Kind of the prologue to everything. The only real off-the-shelf thing that I had is my main system. The computer that was supposed to get me through college that didn't. It was an AMD Athlon. AMD Athlon 750 megahertz. The cartridge processor. I still have it around here, actually. I use it as like a nerd souvenir of that dark time. Here's an interesting piece of trivia. Despite my love of technology and stuff like that, my folks actually would not let me have a computer when I was in high school. Because they knew the minute I had it, then, you know what, we can get past some of this dark mode stuff, and we cut out row 1 and A and 1, put it in the corner, and then make it big enough to take up the whole screen. Do something like this, something like that. Yeah, why don't we do that? Let's take out A, and let's take out 1, so everything's in the corner, and then make it big enough to take up the whole screen. And so we'll see color fill the screen as we go down like this. So actually, it was an HP Pavilion 8700, HP Pavilion 8700 BTO. Didn't have pet names for any of my computers because back then, because this was basically, you know, this was the computer that was supposed to get me through college, and it didn't. We spent nearly $2,000 on that system too. Now, so who's we? Well, my dad helped me out with going off to college and stuff like that. So we bought a service plan too, and Best Buy blew me off when the power supply started flaking out. So one of the reasons why I got into building computers, because Best Buy hosed me on that. Thank you, Geek Squad. You made a nerd out of me. Every cloud is a silver lining. So actually, we need to add another column to this. So let's shrink that back down. Well, maybe not so here. We could always go down to the... We'll do the mathematics on it later. For now, we're just going to do years. This computer went out of service in 2002. So 2000 to 2002 for the HP Pavilion 8700, my one and only off-the-shelf that was my main system, which, when Best Buy blew me off, led to the creation of the Silver Bullet. The Silver Bullet, powered by an AMD Athlon XP 2000. 2002 got me through the rest of college. It was pretty loud, though. Not a very good system in terms of efficiency at all. And didn't have custom cooling on it. I had a Spies piece of junk because I was too worried about messing up the die with the heatsink. Then I bought some aluminum funnels, so a 60 millimeter heatsink fan got expanded up to 120 millimeters through multiple funnels. I think I only went 60-80 in that thing. No, I went 60 to 92. So try to make the fan larger so it would be lower RPMs, the same airflow, and use an aluminum funnel on that. But it died of capacitor plague by 2005. So got out of college, got out of my own after college, and no, it was before the YouTube channel. So it got me through to about Christmas time or so. The next system is one that I still have, but I don't call it this anymore. Silver Bullet 2. AMD Athlon 64 4000 plus. Still a single core, but this is the last AMD until Ryzen that played ball with Intel at the time. Intel came out with Core 2 Duo. And there you go. So 2005, by 2007, I ran into some issues where AMD systems had more expensive memory than Intel systems. Core 2 Duo also became a thing. And so Core 2 Duo took over everything. Core 2 Quad was the rich people processor, but a lot of people who were building computers were doing Core 2 Duo at the time, and AMD had an answer to that, but Intel took back the crown with Conroe. So it was actually one of my shortest lived systems was Silver Bullet 2 with the 4000. It's my 2005 system. I still have it today. That hardware has been in a whole bunch of other things, but it's come home to the Silver Bullet, so to speak, because I have it in the Silver Bullet's original case. So The cases that I was using were Antex, and unfortunately they had too much plastic on the doors that covered up the optical drives, so it broke and I threw it out, and basically it was garbage. Pretty overpriced. Successor to Silver Bullet 2, believe it or not, was Tuxedo. Yeah, Tuxedo. The successor was actually Tuxedo. The first revision of it was with the Core 2 Duo. So Tuxedo is a case that I actually got in 2000. That Chen Ming case that I have for Tuxedo, I actually got in 2007. So, yeah, Tuxedo Revision 1, Core 2 Duo. Core 2, we'll just put Core 2 Duo. That's all that matters. It was a Core 2 Duo. I noticed, but whereas the price of memory was the price of RAM was too expensive for AMD versus Intel at the time, which is why I switched back to Intel, because it was more worth it for me to build a new system than try and squeeze more years out of this single core processor that I was running off of. Tuxedo, Core 2 Duo, the Core 2 Duo era was from 2007, bought a crapo case, which eventually the Core 2 Duo became piano and stuff like that. The old piano case I used to have with the ebony and ivory theme with the, I think it was a Cooler, was it Cooler Master, I think? A long time ago. But eventually processors started moving forward beyond 2 cores. And AMD got a little bit of revenge, sort of, until the Sandy Bridge came out. So by 2010, I was getting rid of the Core 2 Duo. That became part of my secondary system at that point. Tuxedo. So now we're going to do, you know, Tuxedo just regular, because Phenom 2 1090T. The AMD FX chip that I have in it now is not a processor that I was using when it was my main system. And that's basically what we're looking at here. We're looking at the time that each system spends in the spotlight as my main system. So for gaming relevance and all kinds of other stuff. So you have Tuxedo with the Core 2 Duo going from 2007 to 2010, basically revision 1. Tuxedo, for what it's known for the most part, is actually the Phenom 2 1090T years. So in 2010, a year before the Sandy Bridge came out, so feeling like an ass when I looked at my AMD versus Intel history, would have done much better with the Sandy Bridge. Might not have had to upgrade if that was the case. I'd run that sucker right into the ground. I would have probably used the Sandy Bridge right up until Windows 11. Because when Windows 10 works with it, we have it on the Delosaurus right now. So, unfortunately, with the overclocking that I was doing, it started flaking out. The motherboard started to go, and it was not efficient at all. I got my kilowatt and stuff during this time, and I noticed the AMD system it was a chore to get it to ever go below 100 watts, even when idle. The Intels, however, were dropping much, much lower. So I kilowatted a few of them and things like that. So 2010, retired in 2016 for Monolith. Intel Skylake i7 6700K is from 2016 to present day. So we'll just put it in 2021, assuming that I ditched it in order to build something to YOS, years of service. Like it's, yeah. This, to minus from. Notice how it's putting field names in there instead of D2, C2. That's the fun part with doing this type of stuff. The thing is, though, Windows 11 as a free upgrade isn't coming out until 2022, so this is the years of service that we're looking at in terms of all these systems. So, beginning with Tuxedo, I have gotten far more years, and focusing on the processor, I've gotten far more years out of gaming PCs between having to upgrade the major guts of the system than ever before. This is the return on investment. So the Athlon 750, that doesn't count, but it was one of the best processors at the time, but it was rendered obsolete a lot quicker than anything else. Because the cartridge processors did not last long versus the end of the embarrassment between Intel and AMD buying the same cache memory. When cache started to get integrated into the processors and things went back to a more traditional chip design like what we have today, the cartridges were retired very, very quickly. But this was a Pavilion build-to-order, a Best Buy special, and it ran fine, but the power supply flaked out, and it had a proprietary case design that would only take the so-called Chewbacca power supply, as it was called, and it was overpriced. So I know this because when my dad needed a new computer, when the original Dellosaurus that he was using as his main system, Dell Celeron 600 megahertz or so, finally got a little too slow, we made a nice solid system out of the guts of this by putting it into an industry standard case. So Athlon XP2000, this died of capacitor plague after 3 years, so the original Silver Bullet never really had a chance to have lots of longevity to it. So we had proprietary crap, and then we had capacitor plague, which took down this system. But the Athlon XP2000 was not one of the top level, and I was not one of the top level processors at the time. The Athlon 64-4000 was, but there were problems with the price of memory that led to, when I noticed the numbers going much higher on the AMD side of things for basic upgrades like RAM and stuff like that. That's when I was like, I'm just going to go over to Core 2 Duo and see what all the hubbub's about. But when I went to Core 2 Duo, the Core 2 Duo that I got was not close to the top in terms of processing. So you're talking 4 systems for varying reasons. So I only got 2 to 3 years out of them. Tuxedo broke that mold because the 1090T was one of the best processors that AMD had at the time. And I noticed that the graphics card did more for the games I was playing than anything related to the processor. Ran it off the stock cooler for the longest time, then went into some custom cooling, tinkered with some overclocking, got some extra performance out of it, but destabilized the motherboard in the process, unfortunately. Of course, we have the AMD FX in there now. It's kind of just, hey, how long does AMD FX stay relevant and stuff? But 6 years. If I hadn't been overclocking, Tuxedo probably would have kept on trucking along. And I can tell you, let's do a theoretical here with Tuxedo with a Sandy Bridge. If I had stayed with a Core 2 Duo, let's do a theoretical, so let's put it in parentheses. If I had done, why don't we do, if Tuxedo had Sandy Bridge. If Tuxedo had an Intel Sandy Bridge, let's suppose we went with the Intel Sandy Bridge i7 2600K. That would have been from 2011, and it probably minus 2011. It would have been from 2011 to 2021. That would have been my longest lasting system ever if I had built something new this year. So, and the Sandy Bridge ramps way down in terms of power when it's not going crazy, unlike the AMDs of the time. So this would have been awesome. If I could have gotten, if I had that, then that's the thing. Now, if I run Monolith into the ground until I am forced to upgrade in 2025, that will be from Windows 10. That'll be a 9-year-old system, and Monolith will have been the most successful systems I've ever had. But if I want Monolith in its current form to be the most successful system, we're talking 2023 here. So Windows 11 is something I'll sit out on if Microsoft retains the stuffiness. But as you can see, as I've learned more about building systems and looking at more numbers than just what is, cranking the benchmarks really high and giving people bragging rights, as this has continued to be a thing, you can see the longevity of these systems really starting to take off. And if Tuxedo had Sandy Bridge, we'll just turn it blue if it's theoretical. If Tuxedo, we'll use blue text if it's theoretical. Hold on a second. There. Blue text for anything theoretical. If Tuxedo had Sandy Bridge, it would be an i7 2600K, which cost what in 2011? Let's see here. Let's see. i7 2600K price at release in 2011. So the i7 it was $300 in 2011 dollars. I could have afforded that. Grab a motherboard and stuff. I wasn't buying a new case, by the way, going from Core 2 Duo to the Tuxedo that we knew. But if Tuxedo had Sandy Bridge, it would have been my most successful system. And let's, upgrade to Windows 11, and just see how long that lasts. Put in a TPM processor and things along those lines. How much of a jump would that be, though? So I was doing some experimenting here with user benchmark. i7, 11, 6, 11, what is that? Versus 2600K. Let's just get something in user benchmark. Yeah, so the 6700K versus the 2600K only represents an 11% improvement in effective speed. But let me continue. Let me set this up to the Core i7 11700K, which is $380. The non-K is around like 200 something. That's 43% faster. So I would notice a notable. Basically, we're talking about going from 1080p to 4K here. So yeah, I'm looking at user benchmark from 4.8 to 8.16 to go up to a big jump. To go from the Sandy Bridge i7 to the Rocket Lake i7. Very nice stuff. But even still, versus what I have right now, we're still talking like a 20 to 30% improvement in effective speed. So it's worth it for me to upgrade right now. The problem is we have chip shortages going on. So if I want Monolith to outlast Tuxedo, we're talking about Monolith to outlast Tuxedo in its current form. We're talking 2023, but even if I did like 2021, and so it still is, I still have systems on average lasting longer. I still have systems on average lasting longer. Let's see, and let's make that blue. I have systems on average lasting longer than they used to. So 9 years if I get to 2025 when Windows 10 goes end of life, and then what's available by then? Maybe more competition between Ryzen and Intel releasing cheap chips in order to stay competitive. Yeah, well, that's something I got to figure out. Because on the AMD side, they have sockets lasting 4 or 5 years. So processor upgrades and even, a side grade processor to get in on the AMD action could be something by the time Windows 10 is going end of support in 2025. So, either way, assuming I don't just go out and go on a giant spending spree, the current iteration of Monolith will be my most successful computer ever, most likely, because I'm not in any rush to replace anything. I think the big thing that's going to drive everything forward is moving to 4K and being able to support 4K properly. So I don't know what it's going to look like on a 1080 on a 4K TV. Maybe if I keep it the same size, it'll look okay. Well, Windows 10 gaming, 4K TV, but I'm scaling up 1080p in order to do so. Got to see what that looks like. I think the way it's going to work is the TV will conk out first, and then I'll reconsider what I do for sound and what I do, because I use an AV receiver for sound. So that is the Onkyo box I use is absolutely a 1080 device. Will not do 4K. We could always use multiple monitors to trick it into doing things in 1080p by telling the system it's a 1080p monitor. We can still do things that way. Say that the Onkyo is a 1080p monitor to have my sound processed that way and then mirror it to something. But does that force the other monitor down to 1080 as well? That's the wild card there. Or just have it to where it's mirrored with something smaller. I mean, this secondary monitor is 1080, so yeah. This secondary monitor off to the side is 1080, so we could just match them together and have them mirror each other. Huh, well then. So let's see, what do we have in the chat while we're looking at all of this? Got to the Insider Dev channel. They allowed me, What do you think about the fact that Microsoft removed the ability to move the taskbar to any place of the screen? Well, they'll probably put it back. There's a lot of people with rotating monitors nowadays. So, there's a lot of people with rotating monitors nowadays, so I don't see why it would stay that way. Got the Dev Insider. Is today the day? To do what? To test out Windows 11 that's really stuffy with its requirements? Yeah, let's hit save on this, by the way. But this is the progression. This is the progression of getting better at building systems. So, I'm building systems nowadays that can last about a decade before the processor... the Pavilion does not have a name because it was a piece of junk, and it was not a custom-built system. That was the system that convinced me to build computers of my own when Best Buy blew me off and wouldn't honor the service plan when the power supply was flaking out and it was restarting all by itself. Sometimes browning out and the hard drive wasn't detecting when it restarted. Really, really terrible situation. But that's what we're looking at here. Matter of fact, if I push Monolith to 2025, when Windows 10 goes end of support, assuming it isn't extended because of what's going on with TPM, and I just enabled TPM on this processor. Yeah, that's the thing too. The only reason I can't run Windows 11 is because Microsoft says so. The motherboard that I use actually had TPM support that was deactivated for years until the technology became more widespread, but it was optional, and now it's something that a recent BIOS update, maybe it was there, and it wasn't emphasized as much. But I went and I found the alphabet soup name for TPM, and my system supports TPM too. It's activated right now. So I have it, now that I know what it is. I don't like to mess around with stuff where I don't know what it is, because I don't want to break anything, but, you know, my system has support for TPM too. The only reason that I can't run Windows 11 is because Microsoft said so. Your processor's too old. So, this could get even more interesting if we look at, say, the months of service. Because, you know, we're talking 2002. That was actually November of 2002 when I built the Silver Bullet. And then 2005, can't remember when I built my 2005 system, but it was around Christmas that I took a picture and put it on Facebook of my old system dying of capacitor plague. So, orange stuff everywhere. Thing would restart all by itself until the system was warmed up and it would hard lock. Really terrible experience. But what we're looking at here is the most successful computer I've ever built. Whoops. We're looking at the most successful computer that I've ever built here. And it will actually just about match up to what Tuxedo would have been like if I went with Intel Sandy Bridge back in the day. So it would have been a 10-year-old system. That's some serious longevity. So Microsoft needs to take this into account. This is a reason to get into PC gaming. This is a reason to get into PC gaming right here, is the longevity of everything. Now let's make things even more interesting. We've talked about gaming PCs here. Let's expand this even further to the pre-computer world for me. Start adding rows. So computer's gonna start adding rows. Let's compare the computers to the consoles that I grew up with their longevity, and go all the way back to my days, you know, my early years as a gamer playing Atari because it was cheap when Nintendo was the new thing going on. Someone's going to call me a boomer for this, I can tell. My final console before I went off to college was the Nintendo 64, which had like a 33 megahertz, whatever it is. When the PlayStation 2 came out, it had a 300 megahertz processor. I thought it was pretty cool. So, all right. So, Nintendo 64 processor. So, I got my Nintendo 64 in Christmas of 1997. Used it until 2000. So, when we start adding in consoles, that's when it gets a little more interesting. Let's put a parentheses, console. No, I don't really care what the... We can go to Wikipedia and look up the processors if we really want to, but I just want to differentiate the consoles here. And I might gray everything out as well to kind of showcase this. Super Nintendo. C. 1994. let's see here. It was 1994 actually when I got my Super Nintendo. Christmas of 94. Christmas of 94 had some sitters' houses where the kids over there had Super Nintendos and things like that. So 1994 to 1997. Or was it 93? No, 6th grade. I was playing Sim Earth. When was that? I was playing Sim Earth. I was playing Sim Earth in 6th grade on the Super Nintendo. When was that? Let's see. I'm gonna need the calculator for this. 87, 88 first, 89 second, 93rd, 91 4, 92, 93. September for 6. Christmas, etc. So yeah, I had a friend bring it into school we had a little break between our classes, and they had a TV, and there was a Nintendo in the classroom for help kids wind down and stuff like that. Let's do 1993 actually. 93. Yeah. I was playing. Yeah, because around that time I was playing Sim Earth, and it was kind of relaxing, things along those lines. So actually, no. You know the easy way to do that. When was the Super Nintendo free Mario All-Stars promo? There was a promo when I got my Super Nintendo. 1994. Okay, maybe it was 94. It probably was. This was before the single cartridge of Super Mario World and Super Mario 64. Yeah, so it had to have been 1994 because I was super excited. We'll do 94. Because I was super excited. I was super excited when I got Mario All-Stars for Christmas alongside the Super Nintendo. So yeah, that's basically it. I'm going to see. Hope this doesn't give me any content IDs.
Okay, class, pop quiz. Question: free games. Sega gives you no. NES gives free.
Buy any Super NES system, and for $3.50 postage, we'll send you Super Mario All-Stars. That's 4 games free.
Okay, there you go. That's what it was. Yeah, there was a mail-in. If you bought a Super Nintendo, if you bought a Super Nintendo, you could actually get Mario All-Stars along with Super Mario World. So it was a 94 promo. Let's double check that date. So, yeah, I found the commercial. Super Nintendo free Mario All-Stars. We got to go back to the OG one. So 1994. Wow. Yeah, I feel old. Anyways. Because Super Mario All-Stars came out in Oh, no, we can actually look at the Super Mario All-Stars Wikipedia page for this. Because there's probably something in there. It's probably something in there as well. Not the content or the development or the release. Nintendo released Mario All-Stars in Japan in July of 93, North America in August of 93. All right, so let's see. Is there a promo in here? Okay, it had to have been 1993 because Super Mario All-Stars was added into a Super Mario World pack-in cartridge in 1994. So it had to have been 1993 because I didn't even know that there was a Mario World plus Mario All-Stars cartridge until many years later. Thank you, Wikipedia. So it had to have been 1993 because by Christmas of 94, there was one cartridge for the 2 games. So December of 94. Yeah. 1993. So 4 years Super Nintendo. See. When did I got my NES right in time? No. When? Oh, hold on a second. When was Super Mario Brothers 3 released? So I actually had 2 Nintendos. And I'm just gonna call it Nintendo here. Or how about Nintendo Entertainment System Console? Yeah, I was a Nintendo kid. So by 1993. Now, when did I get that? It was Super Mario Brothers 3 was the hot game at the time, but when did it come out? Let's look up the Wikipedia on that. Super Mario Brothers 3 Wikipedia. So it was released in North America on February 12th, 1990. So I did not have Nintendo before we came to Connecticut. We came to Connecticut in 1989. So might have been Christmas of 1989. No. Yeah, we moved to Connecticut. People were bragging about Mario 3. Someone even brought in the instruction book to prove that they had the game, and I thought it was all yellow and stuff. So, yeah, we'll do 1989 for that. 1989 to 1993 for the NES. So, let's see here. Could have been 1990 for all I know, but I actually had 2 Nintendos. And actually, the year that I got the Super Nintendo, my NES was really worn out because of, now we know it's the cartridge connector wears out in those things. So, yeah, so he's like, hey, you know, we not only get you Super Nintendo, we got you a brand new Nintendo. There was one year in which my dad tried to make it a big deal that he bought me another Nintendo, even though it was an old system by then. He probably could have gotten it at a discount because it was very clearly into the Super Nintendo era. So we'll say 1989 to 1993. Now, here's where it gets wild here. There's one more. I said Atari earlier. It was the Atari 7800. And I actually played it alongside my Nintendo for years because it was the flea market system. Nintendo games were expensive back in those days. And so, if you went to a flea market or a yard sale, you could find Atari games all over the place from before the video game crash. The 7800 had backward compatibility to the 2600. So everybody that had a 2600 or a VCS, then that was a thing. So, when I got my Nintendo, excuse me, what was the release date of Mario 3? Because I rented Mario 3 before I got a copy of it for Christmas. I know because I played 2 revisions of Mario 3. The rental version, Toad's dialogue changed between some of those revisions. So I played the one where Toad said, miss twice and you're out, whereas it was updated later to say, you can only miss twice. So, and I played it in Chuck E. Cheese before I had it at home, because I knew about it, just like, you know, the Wizard movie and everything. I didn't even know about the Wizard movie. It was through word of mouth, through kids playing video games, that I found out about Mario 3. Eventually played it at Chuck E. Cheese, too. Let's see here, before the release in the NES. North American NES release of Mario 3 was February 12th of 1990, which makes sense for an 89 date for Christmas 89 date for my Nintendo, because I had Mario and Mario 2 to start, got Mario 3 later, and rented it before I had it. So, February 1990. Run everything out correctly and stuff like that. 87, K, 88, 1, 89, 2. We moved to Connecticut while I was in 2nd grade. Because I had 2 2nd grade teachers. So, that makes sense. Come to Connecticut, get a Nintendo for Christmas. So the Atari says, so 88 is first. We'll put 1988 because the first sitter I had after my mother passed away her kids introduced me to video games. So the ill-fated Atari 7800 was only my main gaming system for a year. Okay, we can save this now. So we look at the longevity here of when things are my main gaming systems. It's not to say there wasn't any overlap. The only reason I still don't have my Atari is because I broke it when I tried to fix it in high school. Brought in the electronics shop because the buttons weren't working very well. Took too much apart and made one of the transistors do a thermal runaway and the whole thing died. So took it off the heatsink, didn't have heatsink compound to put it back on. I was an idiot at the time, obviously. So thermal runaway killed the whole system. You know, and so it just died silently inside a pile of junk in the electronics shop after about 20 years. No, 10 years. 10 years so. 20 years would be 2008. Who am I kidding? Right. So there's the longevity of my main gaming systems here. Atari 7800, of course, that never had much of a chance against Nintendo. Got Nintendo after coming to Connecticut, got 4 years out of it. But I knew about the Super Nintendo in 1992 when some friends I had got it. Super Nintendo 3 to 97. These are Christmas gifts, by the way, so we're talking almost inclusive on the second date. Nintendo 64 from 97 to 2000, so about 3 to 4 years off of my main consoles growing up. The HP Pavilion died after, 2 years of service, roughly. It was already running very badly by the time I got rid of it. Silver Bullet, 3 years, died of capacitor play. Matter of fact, everything that abruptly did not last as long as it should have will turn it red. So the Pavilion died of a flaky power supply, so I built my first system. Silver Bullet died of capacitor plague. Silver Bullet 2, the 2005 system, didn't actually die of anything, but prices for RAM got through the roof. So I went to upgrade the RAM. I was like, I think I'd rather just build a new system instead of continuing to try and upgrade this one. Core 2 Duo, come to think of it, let's turn everything red that didn't last as long as it should have, because I didn't emphasize the processor. So I started falling behind on Core 2 Duo because Core 2, when it started to get old and things like that, and processors, especially on the AMD side, moved beyond 2 cores. So into multi-threading and other stuff. So let's see here. And even if I hadn't gone to college, Nintendo 64 would have probably kept playing until PS2 or whatever. Probably would have played PS2 or something if I wasn't a PC gamer at the time. RIP my third PC with Ryzen 5 1600. Yeah, I know. There's a lot of cheap chips that are now being blanket rendered obsolete by this requirement. It's ridiculous. Especially when the Ryzen 1000 series, cheap as it got, because it's really old at this point, the Ryzen 1000 series renders the entire FX line obsolete because it's newer architecture and more efficient. So a Ryzen 3 1200 in many cases is more worth it than most of what the FX line had, unless you're still playing with the 9590 with its 200 watt TDP. Hook up a kilowatt to that sucker. And the reason why I talk about power efficiency is that computers are not very good at it compared to mobile devices. If you've ever done put a watt meter on your phone when it was charging and figured that thing can do basic computing, you can project to a screen and use it as your computer for a couple of watts tops. But yeah, this is it. So my first 4 systems had something cut their lifespan short in some way, shape, or form. The first system I had that really was successful was Tuxedo. And even then, it would have been even more successful if I'd gone with Sandy Bridge. So, but this is what I'm talking about. When you do it right, you get more longevity out of gaming PCs than out of consoles. That's what Microsoft needs to take into account with some of these artificial obsolescence things here. I think I'm actually going to take a screenie of this. Let's bring back A and 1. Insert. Let's bring back A and 1 so I can get a clean screenshot of this for later. It was fun filling the screen with all of this, but yeah, we'll put this on Twitter. And actually, let's see. There we go. Let's make it nice. Let's make it all compact and stuff like that. And save. So, the key takeaway with this is that if you build your systems right, they will probably last longer than consoles. Now, in the case of Tuxedo and Monolith, they're tied to 1080p. So, the next system that runs in the Define 7 something or another, the Define 7 XL, which is $200 just for the case, so I might have to buy that in waves. Make some, work some overtime, buy some parts here and there and put it together. Something like that. But right now, I have until 2025 to make up my mind on when to move to Windows 11. I'm just bummed out that I'm not going to be moving to it before it releases. So I'll stay Windows 10 for a while unless Microsoft gets less stuffy. If I can put Windows 11 on the OG monolith, I will wait until it struggles with 4K before doing any more upgrades. So I wanted monolith to be my most successful system ever, and so far it's on track to do that. It's only this artificial obsolescence that threatens that in any way, along with things like the part shortages and things along those lines. So, yeah, so red denotes something that got its lifespan cut short. Power supply died, capacitor plague, RAM price gouging, and then I didn't focus enough on the processor, so it only lasted 3 years before it was struggling with World of Warcraft. Tuxedo lasted 6 years. And I guess technically you could say you could turn that one red too. You could turn that one red despite lasting 6 years because I destabilized the system with overclocking. So technically Tuxedo had it. So really we're seeing now with Monolith the kind of longevity that if you play your cards right, you can get with a gaming PC. And it smokes the living daylights out of any console I've ever owned. Let's get theoretical here. If you went from, let's put in PlayStation 2 as a theoretical and turn it blue. If I had gotten a PlayStation 2 when it came out in 2000 because I was rich, I would have played it until 2006 and gotten 6 years out of the console. It's really not until PS3 that we see from like 2006 to, PS4 comes out, things along those lines. Xbox 360 had a long lifespan too. So there have been some consoles that have lasted for a really long time, but that was kind of a fluke type thing. And when you consider the PS4, you have OG PS4 and PS4 Plus, or PS4 Pro, whatever it was. PS4 with boost mode, basically. The upgraded PS4. Then there was the Xbox One, and then there was the Xbox One X. So even the generations have 2 SKUs within them. So you look at the Series X, who knows? But you're talking computers that if you play your cards right can last the better part of a decade, hardware-wise. And that's because I don't go along with a lot of the contemporary wisdom when I build these things. I look at from the ground up, the engineering stuff that I know about, the electronic stuff that I know about, the computer stuff that I know about, and that is how I've been able to have systems that can last the better part of decades. Monolith, people guffawed me for not getting an i5, but I saw Ryzen coming. And now if I run this until Windows 10 goes EOL, if that doesn't get extended, 9 years with the same system. And that was the idea. Be strong with the processor so it stays relevant through multiple graphics cards. Because graphics cards come out, they make the old ones obsolete and the prices drop. And most importantly, graphics cards are a transferable upgrade. You can buy your graphics card and take it with you to the next system. So if you think you're close to needing a new processor, you can get the graphics card, find out it sucks with the processor, and take it with you to the next system. It's not like having to worry about sockets and what RAM is supported and things along those lines. And that's part of what puts a dent in my adoption of the AMD Ryzen as well. Sure, AMD got a socket to last for years, but can you make that work? And here's the problem. I didn't want to wait for the Ryzen, which was getting delayed way back when, so I went Intel. Well, now Ryzen has forced Intel to lower prices, so I could get an 11th gen Core i7 system, which will support Windows 11 and have all the security stuff right off the bat after the part shortages, and benefit from AMD indirectly because they forced Intel to lower prices to stay competitive. So I'm in a situation where here we are again, where Intel is finding a way to look appealing to me in the midst of Ryzen mania. Because we're waiting for a timetable on when Socket AM5 is going to come out. But wait for Socket AM5, which could be next year or something like that. If we wait for Socket AM5, we're talking how long is that socket going to stick around if AMD likes keeping these sockets around for years? So processor upgrade, more of a thing. Maybe new BIOS updates allow for faster RAM and stuff. Then we can look at other features on the motherboard that get better, like bus speeds and things along those lines. PCI Express, blah, blah, blah. But the question is, how does that not eat into the ROI of a Ryzen system? You have a socket that's around for 5 years, but something else improves in those 5 years. Was it really worth it? Or should the old way of thinking about guts upgrades linking together the processor, the motherboard, and the RAM as a bundle package? Is that still relevant? But I can tell you, with this system, even if Microsoft doesn't extend support past 2025, Monolith will be my most successful system ever. When you know what you're doing, you can make this stuff last and get loads of enjoyment out of it. And actually, if I really want to be silly about it, my motherboard, thanks to a BIOS update, would support Kaby Lake, so I could upgrade to a 7700K, but that wasn't very interesting. You know, Skylake to Kaby Lake wasn't all that interesting. Things with Intel have gotten more interesting more lately, but now you got to talk about manufacturing technology of 14 nanometer versus 7 nanometer now. There's too many unanswered questions. There's way too many unanswered questions when it comes to where everything's going to go in the next few years. So by the time we're staring down the EOL dates, I might just, if Microsoft allows exception systems to test Windows 11, we'll take a throwaway system like the Dellosaurus and throw it on there and see how it goes. And it'll get kicked out when the preview's over. Then it'll get kicked out when the preview's over. But so this is it. You're talking, and it would have been even better if I hadn't used the AMD in 2010. If I'd waited another year, built a Sandy Bridge system in 2011, could probably still be using it today. I've seen Intel's, especially in those generations, run very rock solid for years. That's part of the Dellosaurus experiment too. See what I missed. Should upgrade the power supply in that thing and see how it pairs up with a graphics card, see how that works. Did it with Dellosaurus Rex. But Dellosaurus Rex, the Ivy Bridge system, is more power efficient if you don't have a graphics card. So if I wanted a second computer for recording stuff, so I don't use any CPU cycles to capture things, that's what I would use. Gotta figure this out, huh? 2011, 2021, etc. Take a look at the rest of the chat stuff. If modern PC builders would make a car, they put a V10 in a Honda Civic. There used to be an Apple II program that I used to play in school called Car Builder, and I put like a V8 in a stupid little compact car. The program would test drive it and say, driving this thing through corners is scary. An Apple II program. Yeah, we're going back. Of course, the school districts I grew up in weren't funded very well. So, a V10 and a Honda Civic. Well, I emphasize the processor because the processor and your motherboard and your RAM tend not to be transferable upgrades, but graphics cards are. So, you want to play ball. It's kind of like a cycle. When you're building, emphasize the CPU. When it's between builds, emphasize the GPU. So, I just didn't get a chance to do that because of the GeForce 3 grand shortages. I went and picked up a 2 grand one because I thought there'd be shortages. Modern PC builders will make a car, they put a V10 in a Honda Civic. Yeah. I remember Ryzen 5 1600, 2600 in disguise. Yeah, well, the problem I had with Ryzen, the early Ryzens, is that I knew they wouldn't be better than Intel because they were basically picking up where Xeon left off. The selling features of them was multi-core. But if you look at the performance of the Ryzen 7 1700X versus what I have, it wasn't an improvement. All that changed was the number of cores. 6700K versus 1700X. CPU user benchmark. If you run those two through user benchmark, you're talking a 13% advantage to the Intel. When's the insider preview coming out? I don't know. I think I'm shut out of testing Windows 11, which is a bummer because I was a very early adopter of Windows 10. When it was in preview mode, I was using it. Turd Shiva took their laptop to New York many years ago. Yeah, for a business trip. It was running a Windows 10 Preview Edition on it. I was using the Preview Edition as my main OS on certain computers. Might even, was I using it on? I'd have to check my videos, see what I was running at the time. I liked Windows 10. It was a huge improvement over Windows 8, that's for sure. So yeah, we got the Windows 10 experiment still on there too. So videos are still out. I'm more rambly back then. Nowadays, the rambling's reserved for the streams. You got to think about what you're doing as you do this kind of stuff. All right, so Ryzen 7 1700X didn't, it was an increase in cores, but it wasn't an increase in performance, just a change in the architecture. When we went to 2700X versus 6700K, the performance improvement was still 2% more for the Skylake. 3700X was the first processor that I thought I might want to get, but even that's only a 5% advantage over what I have right now. Let's keep going. Ryzen, the best if I want to do Ryzen 7 instead of the enthusiast Ryzen 9, $389 gets me the 5800X. 20% improvement, which is roughly what I'd get from an i7 as well. So, i7, 11700K, $380, same price point for about a 30% improvement. So let's go back to that Ryzen. The 9s on both sides, 5800X, the 9s on both sides, and let's do i7, 11700. Yeah, they're in the ballpark with each other. The thing about Intel, despite not having the newer manufacturing, they have a very refined product because they sell a ton of Intel stuff to corporate America. I don't mind. I prefer a stable system over something I'm endlessly tinkering with, but I might get performance stuff if I don't cook something. For me, it's a massive improvement from the FX 8320 to the Ryzen 1600. Yeah, well, let's see. Ryzen 1600 was a... Yeah, let's use that. Let's punch that in. Let's compare it. I'm looking at user benchmark, but you can all see this, by the way, if you want. Just being kind of lazy with not showing it on screen. Don't want a bunch of weird pop-up ads, too, if they have, like, geolocation and things like that. And like, hey, the antique store 2 miles down the road in the hick town is having a sale this weekend. Like, whatever. See here. And that was what? Comparing it versus 8320? FX 8320. The 8320E is the one that I have. The hippie chip of the FX series. Versus Ryzen 5 1600. 14% effective speed advantage versus the FX. And I think the power is a lot better too on that. 65 watt TDP versus 125 watt because FX was just blah. It was AMD. The real reason to have an AMD is because it was AMD. That's basically it. Like that. The 8350 Sabertooth. That lovely combo. Asus Sabertooth FX 8350. Well, if you overclock the heck out of it, you can do better than an Ivy Bridge. You probably could, if you knew what you were doing. The thing is, though, Intel sells these similar processors to companies as well. So there's an emphasis on refining how the processor works and of course, power efficiency. Because your overhead costs are part of how you manage computers in the enterprise. So Intel with its corporate background fundamentally plays to the stuff that I look for on the efficiency side, because I don't want a computer that's the equivalent of driving a diesel truck like driving a big rig or a semi to the store for a loaf of bread or something like that. Or how about a dump truck? Yeah, I'll jump in the dump truck and guzzle a ton of diesel to go down to the store for a loaf of bread. Maybe I'll coal roll someone in a Prius on the way back. Like, yeah, I'm going to drive a dump truck as my daily driver. So, no, I don't want a computer that's like that. The challenge to the desktop, specifically from mobile devices, including laptops, is efficiency. You get enough power to do what you need to do, and then it ramps way down when you're doing wimpy stuff like browsing the web. So even the turd Shiba, Toshiba laptop circa 2015 went down to 8 watts when it wasn't doing anything. It's a piece of junk. Little things have been breaking on it for the past 5+ years. It's terrible. I will not buy another Toshiba laptop ever again, but it got that right at least. Yeah, that's a video waiting to happen. The things I've done to keep the turd Shiba working is comical. 2015, I want to buy i7 4790K. Yeah, well, that was what? Devil's Canyon or something? The Lake processors was where Intel really got back into their stride. So it's just get past the thermal interface material scandals and crap like that. Of course, there's Haswell Delosauruses out there if somebody wants to play ball with them. Yeah. Devil's Canyon. Yeah, I remember that stuff. But you see, what are we talking about here? I mean, do you have a Devil's Canyon system, the 4790K? So, do you have a Devil's Canyon system that can still play 1080p 60? Yeah, and can it touch 4K, like 4K 30? Tuxedo could have actually done 4K 30, but I want to keep 60 frames per second. And the wild card is that this TV, the replacement for this TV is basically going to be, 27% improvement for Advantage Intel. Yeah, The improvement for this TV, the replacement for this TV is going to be 4K 120 because that's all that's sold nowadays. Gonna get another Samsung. Probably gonna buy some arms and stuff, not use the default stand. Because I want it to be able to move the screen around. It's gonna be lighter, so it can probably handle a monitor stand. To Vesa screws in the back to a clamp on the bottom and clamp it to the desk. That way I can get my desk back. Put it up a little, put some things underneath it. Not put the center channel on top of the TV via one of those TV shelves. I wonder if the torque from that is part of what's killing this TV. Yeah. Well, we have our numbers here, and we have the proof is in the numbers. And I can probably put this... I can probably do what I did last time, make a thumbnail by truncating this and putting it over the MultimediaJay thing. That looked kind of cool last time, so I'm probably going to put this in as well. And we'll put it on Twitter as well. But I think we've stared at Excel long enough tonight. So let's just go over some stuff in the chat. It's 4:18. We can talk about maybe a few more things here and whatnot. So leave OBS on screen too. Actually, no, put it on screen too so we can light up and stuff like that. There we go. Yeah, 2015, wanted to buy a Devil's Canyon. Once we got past the TIM scandals with Intel, when the Lake processors came out, that was when I think they really got back into their stride. The thing is, though, what's in play here is something that has driven IT administrators nuts for a very long time, when computers last longer than they're supposed to. The 9-to-5ers actually had an IT policy that computers needed to be replaced after 5 years. The life cycle for every computer the company bought was 5 years. By the time 5 years had passed, there'd probably be security improvements, efficiency improvements, performance improvements, things like that. But for the last couple of hardware cycles, everything has lasted a lot longer. So the Dell Optiplexes, the flat ones, the desktop version, not the towers that I use for the Delosaurus project. The Dell Optiplexes lasted the better part of a decade. Now they've been replaced with little net tops that have solid state drives in them and Comet Lake low power Intel i5s. They have quite a bit of punch, but they have zero graphical capability, so they can't be used for games. So they run Excel pretty nicely though. 2700, but upgrading to 37 or 58 if the prices keep getting better. If I got into Ryzen now, I'm getting it at the end of socket AM4, and I don't want that. I want to get in at the beginning of socket AM5. And so Microsoft's thrown a nice little wrench into this. Microsoft has thrown a nice little wrench into this whole thing. But again, this just goes back to the longevity of gaming PCs. I bet if you kept that around as a system to just see how long it stays relevant, you'd have some fun for years to come. And I think that's really the last thing we need to talk about with all of this is the security side of it. When a system is no longer your main system, you're not putting the sensitive stuff on there because you're not paying your bills on it or something. It's literally just games. If someone breaks into that, what do they get? Your Steam account? That has two-factor authentication. So, which will pop to your main system. or your phone or something like that. So, What exactly would someone nefarious get with that? That's the thing. It makes me wonder if maybe it won't be as big of a deal when Windows 10 goes EOL, because Windows 10 going EOL, or EOS in this case, you just put it on a gaming system. You have an old gaming PC around. Security software, I saw this with Windows XP, by the way. Security software might actually still keep working in terms of updates to the security software, even though the OS is no longer receiving updates. So you have your companies like Kaspersky and Avast maybe updating, making patches and things like that to avoid any exploits and things like that. So there might be some life to be found through security software, but I'm telling you, corporate America would never spring for that. Some small businesses might, though. I was very soberingly reminded of this when went to a medical appointment earlier, a couple days ago, and we went to check out. I couldn't go into the office where they were typing in the appointments because of HIPAA, Health Insurance Privacy Act, and things like that. But I could hear from the computers dinging and what they had on the window they had on the screen, even though I couldn't see anything because I was too far away. And they're still running Windows 7, an EOL operating system in a medical office. And how about the infamous scandal regarding Windows XP and ATMs past the end date, even of the embedded version, which traditionally was used in special things like that, which had a few more years of support. And some diehard XP fans tried to get embedded to to work on their computers to get a couple more years of Windows XP. But it seems like that the longevity of computers is what dogs Microsoft in this case. And then we see stuff like this as a result. Yeah, so give it like a minute or two for any more stuff here. Actually, we'll take this out of the shot when it disappears out of the preview window. There we go. It's a wrap. So there we go. Let's see how this stream did, actually. Did YouTube get upset at it? But I'm finding that YouTube's been doing better at that kind of stuff than they used to. A live tab? We did not get demonetized. That's nice. I think YouTube's actually working on improving this kind of stuff. And even improving what the experience is when you get demonetized as well. Just while live, though, the people that have stopped by tonight have already gotten this to nearly 30 views. So, which is, what some of the other stuff got after the fact. But I hope this demonstration has been useful in terms of showing if you know what you're doing, you're going to get years out of these computers. And Microsoft needs to acknowledge that. And the last thing we talked about, which we should probably wrap up with that part of the discussion, is when a system is just for gaming, you take all your sensitive everything off of it. Your main system has all the latest security stuff, runs Windows 11, whatever. You keep an old gaming system around to see, how long can a Skylake keep gaming? Not going to be your main system. You're not going to have it on all the time. The vectors for an attack close a little, not completely, because you have an old system, but your security software can pick up where the OS left off, like we saw at Windows XP. Fundamentally, though, what Microsoft needs to take into account is that they're basically creating a Windows XP thing all over again with all of these people who are now going to have forced obsolescence on their system with no more patches. But you can still keep using it after the fact, just a security issue. So, but somebody buying a cheap gaming PC, especially when there's hardware shortages all over the place, someone buying a cheap gaming PC that won't be covered in the Windows 11 era, you think, my Skylake system, could it still have the punch in a couple more years? Of course, by then, maybe Intel and AMD will get processors that are 60% faster in effective speed than what I have right now. The thing is, though, tinkering and enthusiasm is a thing. There's people out there that are building their dream Windows XP systems and their dream Windows 7 systems, and maybe even their dream Windows 98 or 95 or 3.1 systems for those eras in PC gaming, to get the experience they wish they could have had back in those time periods. So people are going to keep doing that. So, I mean, Microsoft can do their thing, yeah, but fundamentally they can push people to adopt new security technology, because attacks via non-traditional means, like say going after the firmware of your router or something, that's becoming more of a thing than ever before these days. As the Internet of Things, more mobile devices, and other things take over from computers, the way in which people try to mess with them or steal data or something or do other nefarious stuff is changing along with it. And so that's why we're talking things like TPMs nowadays, or hardware devices that add a hardware component to sensitive information. Yeah, maybe we didn't need it 5 years ago, and now it's more of a thing nowadays. But the systems that would be most affected by this are probably either going to be maybe folks with not a lot of money. So if someone, hacked their bank account or something, what would they get? A pittance. And then there's also the element of it may not be their main system. And like I said last time, it could be their phones. Their phones are their main system nowadays. So they don't even bother with a computer for anything except maybe playing a movie here and there, or playing a couple of video games. Because PC gaming, still very viable. Of course, consoles are coming out in stride. Are hitting their stride now with the Series X and the PS5. Once the equipment shortages are over, if Microsoft can ever sell the Series X at that $500 price point that we heard about before, that would be one heck of a way to get into some pretty awesome gaming. Consoles have some muscle these days, they just cost more. So if the Series X can ever sell at the $500 mark, that's going to render a lot of these older PCs stuck in the 1080p world as blah in terms of that stuff. So it kind of pushes them out into a category similar to the dream machines people are making, like my Dream XP machine, my Dream Windows 7 machine, and into like, nostalgia machines and things like that. Windows 10 will probably end up in that category several years from now, but that's the world we live in. Sometimes you gotta come to grips with the silent march of technology and how things the silent march of time and how technology silently ages. Don't forget, in less than 2 months, Monolith will be a 5-year-old system. You'd never tell that. You'd never be able to tell that because I'm running 1080-60 ESO maximum settings with a 2060 RTX. Now, it's a really cool system still. It's the most successful system I've ever built. It's maintained itself well. It's an event if I ever see a blue screen of death. It's awesome. Could run it into the ground for years to come. But it won't run Windows 11. Go figure. And it has TPM too through the motherboard. But the processor, according to Microsoft, is too old. So, that one stupid little detail is the reason why I am going from early adopter of Windows 10 to laggard of Windows 11, except for some experiments on secondary systems. I'm not going to adopt Windows 11 the way I did Windows 10, with anywhere near the speed, because I am not being rushed into building a system just to run Windows 11. The end. And I don't care if other people make videos and I don't. I really don't care. These tactics these companies use to force people to buy stuff, it's anti-consumer. I'll upgrade when I'm good and ready, and it'll be one heck of a system, and we're going to be having this discussion again in a couple more years. Because with the Define 7 XL, we're talking about I don't want to get any more cases after that. I would actually do an upgrade in the Define R5 that I use from Monolith. I would actually do an upgrade in that case. Except I wanted an XL size case, but there was never a Define R5 XL. There was the previous Define, which had some issues with the design. The Define 7, though, is the case I should have had all these years. So, starting with whatever I build next, that's going to be a case that I'm going to have. And Tuxedo hosted multiple sets of hardware before no longer being my main system. Core 2 Duo, 1090T. So, this next system I build, which will be built to run Windows 11, among other things, is going to be a system that is even more prone, short of something like a lightning strike, to landing us in this boat again if Microsoft decides to pull this again in several more years. So, Microsoft needs to learn this lesson and learn it quickly. Not every consumer out there buys disposable computing appliances that don't have the upgradability or the hardware to last more than a few years. Some of us know what we're doing, and some of us want to get our money's worth. And some of us want to see computers that truck on out into the long haul of the future, so to speak. 2016 system, still perfectly fine for me, except in Microsoft's world, where the processor is by fiat declared too old, even though the motherboard will support TPM2 through a BIOS update integrating with the CPU. Like I said, we'll keep an eye on how Microsoft develops things and whether they stop being so stuffy. I support the security side of it, but there's a whole other side to this, and there's some unintended consequences that aren't being talked about. Like what's going to happen when Windows 10 goes EOL for people with gaming PCs from this generation. And maybe they don't want to upgrade because it's just something they play some games on here and there. They're casual about it. We shall see. Till next time, this is MultimediaJay signing off. Thanks for stopping by.